All right, good morning. If you're just joining us, we'll be getting started in just a couple of minutes. We'll let people join into the webinar. And if you're just logging on, we'll be getting started in just a few moments with the webinar. Thank you for joining us today as we talk about the COVID-19 vaccine, part of a series of webinars that we are putting on. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Garrett Sheehan. I'm President and CEO of the Greater New Haven Chamber of Commerce. Thanks for joining us for our webinar today, talking about the COVID-19 vaccine. And this is part of a series of webinars that we will be putting on over the next several weeks as we continue to encourage everyone to take advantage of the vaccine. It's the best way for us to get back to full economic activity. Before we get started, I want to thank all of our sponsors, our premier investors who help us put on this programming and all of the activities we do at the Chamber, as well as our key investors and principal investors. Their support has been critical over the last year, and we continue to thank them for everything that they do for us. Very excited about the program that we have for you today. We have two speakers. We're going to start off with Josh Chabal, who is the Chief Operating Officer for the state of Connecticut. And then after we speak with Josh, we're going to turn to Dr. Arjun Venkatesh, Associate Professor and Chief of the Section of Administration in the Department of Emergency Medicine at Yale University and a doctor at Yale New Haven Hospital. Josh, thanks again for joining us. This has been a regular appearance that you've been having, and I think back to over a year ago, you were supposed to be at the Chamber for a meeting about upgrading the computer systems, and then COVID-19 hit. So, but we appreciate everything that you've been doing with the governor and the governor's leadership on this. And I wanted to check back in with you. I know you've been leading a lot of the efforts on getting the vaccine out. Connecticut has been a leader across the country in getting people vaccinated. Thank you to all of our residents in our state who have done it. And get an update from you on where we are with the vaccine campaign.
Sure. Well, thanks, Garrett, for having me back, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you, particularly today. May 20th is a date that I will remember, I'm sure, for the rest of my life. Some of you probably will as well, as the date last year when we began the process of starting to reopen the state after hunkering down for that first horrible wave of COVID. May 20th was the date that we took those first phase 1 baby steps. If everyone remembers, outdoor dining was allowed, and non-essential retail was allowed to reopen in the stores, and some other baby steps. And it's amazing, where we've come over the last year to the point we're at. As of yesterday, the governor has now removed all of the restrictions around business activity. The sector rules have now been eliminated, and we are, getting back quickly here to our new normal, and very focused right now on getting the economy really going as quickly as we can, trying to recover the jobs that have been lost, helping to support all of you in your businesses and in your efforts to get back to where we were before COVID, which was with a lot of momentum in the state of Connecticut, which in many respects we still have. We can talk more about, but fortunately, what's made this all possible, of course, is the rapidly improving picture on COVID. We're hitting like 7-month lows right now on all the key COVID metrics. Cases have been declining rapidly. We're going to report numbers today that I won't leak the news early, but that will hit some important thresholds in a very positive way. And we're, hospitalizations are down dramatically. So, that's in no small part to the tremendous work that so many have done around the state, our providers, our partners in local health, our hospital systems, to get people vaccinated. And as you said, Garrett, Connecticut's been in the top 5 in the nation since the vaccination program began back on December 14th, in terms of getting people vaccinated quickly and thoughtfully, in a way that got the people who are most at risk for severe COVID vaccinated quickly and early, helped drive down the number of people dying from COVID more quickly than our neighboring states. But as we sit here today in the middle of May, we're at a position now much different than I think last time I was with you, when we were in a position of tremendous scarcity several months ago. We're now in a position of tremendous abundance of vaccines, far more supply than we have demand. And in a position where there's a lot less people to vaccinate as well. We've got over 92% of our seniors have gotten their first shot. We've got over 73% of all adults 18 and above, so almost 3/4 of all adults 18 and above have gotten their first shot. We've opened up now to the adolescents 12 to 15, got a big chunk of them vaccinated already in the first week. That's going well. But we know that, particularly with one eye on the fall and the winter, understanding that there's probably some significant seasonality to this virus, like many other respiratory viruses, we want to continue to work as hard as we can to get everyone vaccinated, both to make sure that activities through the summer, particularly indoor activities, can be done very safely, as well as making sure we don't deal with any future resurgences in going forward. So the state remains very focused, working with our partners and our providers on, continuing to continue the momentum on vaccines. We're now shifting more, though, from the kind of mass vaccination phase. Those mass vaccination sites are going to see starting to wind down in the coming days and weeks, to much more of a kind of person by person, block by block kind of grassroots vaccination strategy, where we have lots of mobile vaccination clinics, people out knocking on doors, lots of social media, outbound communications, pharmacy walk-ups, homebound vaccinations, free transportation, and many other initiatives that we're working hard on, just to try to make it as easy as we possibly can for people who may have been taking a bit more of a wait and see approach, to finally, take that next step and get the vaccination, as well as, the continuing efforts to address concerns and questions that people still have who have not yet gotten vaccinated. And we continue to see thousands of people every day come in for their first shot. So, it's still happening. People are still trickling in, but we want to continue that momentum as much as we can through the summer. And, to that point, I always try to show up with these with an ask of something that you all can do to help here. And, we have these mobile vaccine vans, these yellow vans, which we can dispatch very flexibly to events or to workplaces where there's going to be a group of people, where we might have critical mass, where there could be, 10, 20, 30 people even, where, having a van, right there could make the difference in those people being willing to get vaccinated. When I'm done talking, I'll drop in the chat the link to the website where you can go on and request one of those yellow vans to come to your workplace, to come to an event that you may be sponsoring or participating in, where you think it might be helpful to have one of these vans come show up and provide vaccine to people who will be there. Mostly just the message today is wanted to thank all of you. I know it's been an incredibly stressful and challenging year to be a business owner, business manager. The efforts to keep your head above water, to keep your employees employed, help them through such a challenging time and get through this. But we're really there, and that's in no small part to your sacrifice and your support and perseverance through all of the challenges we've had over the last year. So I know the governor is exceptionally grateful to all of you and people of Connecticut for the teamwork and the compassion and empathy we've showed to each other, and the sacrifices we've all made together to try to get through this. So much appreciated. Garrett, I'll turn it back to you, and happy to stay for questions.
Thanks, Josh. And what is as you said, Connecticut's been in the top 5 from the beginning of the vaccination effort. Is there a number that you have that we're shooting for? I know the herd immunity, community immunity number has shifted from the science as we've seen other variants, but what is the target that we're trying for? Obviously, we want to get everyone to get vaccinated.
Yeah, there's no specific number other than, we'd love to get to 100%. We know that's not going to happen, but we're just trying to get every single person, every single needle that goes in an arm, takes one small step towards protecting that person, obviously, but also breaking the potential changes transmission, preventing, resurgences in the future. So, every additional vaccination is a win for us, and we're just going to keep pushing forward.
Have there been any specific groups that have been more challenging, and as you're doing communications or just kind of messaging that people here should share with their friends who maybe have been hesitant to take the vaccine? Any specific targets that you guys have?
No, I think one of the things we've learned, and maybe the doctor can comment on this more, but, our sense, particularly in Connecticut, is the areas where, we still see questions or concerns have to do with safety, vaccine safety, right? Is this safe? What about side effects? I've heard about people who feel bad the next day, et cetera. And then secondly, this kind of overarching concern of like, was this rush to market? It seems like these approvals happened very quickly. Those are two of the key themes. And, again, I defer to the doctor who can address this, but, I think as business leaders, we all, in my prior life as a business leader, like we're very good at kind of weighing risks and rewards of decisions, right? In terms of not just understanding the risk and the rewards of taking a decision, but also the risk and rewards of not taking a decision. When you weigh, the risk of feeling crummy for a day after your second dose versus the risk of getting COVID, and what that could mean for you or how you could spread that to your family, I think, objectively, there's really no comparison whatsoever. And I think more and more people kind of get that. And then also on the notion of, these vaccines coming to market quickly, again, doctor can comment on this, but, mRNA has been researched for over a decade, right? It's just, we got incredibly fortunate as a society, right? That the technology, the biotechnology behind this was available and really at the point of maturity at the same time we needed it for COVID. But it's been a long time coming. Billions of dollars invested in this technology platform over a decade now, and for those of us who've been in and around the biotech industry, of which Connecticut, of course, has been a real leader over the last decades, I think people understand that, have maybe in many cases participated in that research and development over the years as well. So. Look, it's just about communication, helping people understand and get their questions answered. And I think we'll continue to see those rates go up over time.
And Josh, before we let you go, as we said again, Connecticut's been right near the top from the beginning. And you can look each day and see what percentage of vaccine we've used that we've been given. We've always been really high in utilization. What is it that you guys have been able to do, especially as the dynamics have changed over the last several months, to be able to stay up at that high number, be able to get the vaccine to different locations where it's needed, get as many people through the lines? It seems like a real logistical challenge that you've been very successful at dealing with.
Yes, it has been. And again, I really want to give all credit to our providers. We tried as hard as we could as the state to really work in close partnership with them. Our hospital systems, our local health departments, our pharmacy networks, our federally qualified health centers, they've really been the ones on the front lines and making sure that we were doing everything we could to create the environment, the rules, the structure, but still provide the flexibility and the trust to them as well, to be able to move quickly and nimbly to scale up a really remarkable amount of time, incredible infrastructure to get people vaccinated, to do outreach into underserved communities. And, it's a real testament to them, I think, in terms of their dedication to stepping up at this unique moment in time and really providing tremendous leadership to the state.
Great. And I'll just say, if anyone has any questions for Josh, you can throw them in the chat. We're going to get to Dr. Arjun in just a moment. But Josh, I'll leave you with this question. On the 19th, and you brought up the 20th, which was a great anniversary on the 19th yesterday, most of those restrictions went away. Are you fielding any questions from businesses as to what's the appropriate thing for them to do? It has been a kind of big rush over this last week since we heard from the CDC with the new guidance for people who are vaccinated. The governor had already set into motion many of these changes based on how successful we've been in Connecticut. But I guess how is that transition, or what are some of the questions you've been hearing over the last week or so from businesses as to how to deal with the changes in rules.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Garrett. And there's a question in the chat I see as well that's, I think, somewhat related to this about, that how should people think about this moment in time, right? We have some people thinking that it's premature, right, to be, watering down the mask mandate. And other people, of course, who have been screaming from the rooftops for months that we shouldn't even have a mask mandate at all in the state of Connecticut. And particularly, I think, as we look back over the last year, every moment of transition from one phase to another, whether we were dialing up restrictions or dialing them back, brings concern, right? Typically from both sides, people who feel like we're going too fast, feel like we're going too slow. And I think, what the governor has tried to do throughout the last year, and I, my personal opinion, I think he's done exceptional job of trying to balance this, is to listen to the public health professionals, the doctors, the lead with the science, but also understand where the people of Connecticut are, right? And understand that, you can, change rules however you want, but if the people aren't there with you and you don't bring them along and you don't help communicate the decisions you're making and why they're necessary, then it all falls apart, and you don't get the behavior that you're hoping for that can help either protect people or help people feel more comfortable that it's okay to go back into some of the places they may have been avoiding over the last year, but that it's time, and it's time to get back to that new normal, because the risk level is sufficiently low based on vaccinations, based on community prevalence. It's not zero. There's still risk out there. There's still people checking into the hospitals in Connecticut every day with COVID, severely ill. And I don't think we're at a point where we're going to see that go to zero in the foreseeable future, unfortunately, because we are going to have a lot of people that aren't vaccinated, unfortunately. But that's, again, back to why our goal is to continue to put our shoulder to the wheel here to get as many people vaccinated as we can, and communicate as actively and transparently as we can about the decisions and where we are, what the relative risks are, what we feel are responsible things for people to do, particularly vaccinated people, where the science has shown now with real world evidence that the risk to a vaccinated person of contracting COVID, or even if they were to get an infection, of getting ill and transmitting it to others, is exceptionally low. So that is just phenomenally great news. And I think but it is going to take some time, right, for all of us to kind of get used to this new world that we're in.
Great. Well, Josh, thanks again. I know there's, even as some of the restrictions start to wind down, there's still a lot on the governor's plate, end of a legislative session, as you had mentioned, bringing state employees back to work. So I know you have a lot of things to get to, but we appreciate you spending some time with us.
It's always a pleasure, Garrett. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Josh. And so now we're going to welcome in Dr. Arjun Venkatesh. And Doctor, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I know I've already seen in the Q&A and in the chat lots of questions about the vaccine. And one of the things we're hoping to try to do today is give people an opportunity to hear about the vaccine, get a better understanding of how it's working, ask their questions. Some people on the line who maybe have not taken the vaccine are hesitant about it. Others also who know people they want to encourage to take it. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'll let you take the floor and tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out there as far as COVID and also the vaccine.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Garrett. And I should, start by saying thank you to Josh and the governor's office. I think that, we are in Connecticut just so fortunate. We have been organized, strategic in our response to sort of COVID through the entire pandemic. And so, I grew up in Ohio. I have a lot of family that lives in Ohio still, friends all over the country, doctors who work in ERs around the country. And when I get on the phone or Zoom and I talk to them and I hear about what's going on in other parts of the country, we dealt with a really hard part of this pandemic by having to go first early on. But when I think of the last year, especially from last May to what we've done till now, we have had just an amazing response, right? We had a summer last summer with some of the lowest transmission rates of COVID in the entire country. And now we have one of the highest vaccination rates in the country. And so I think that what that bodes well for is our ability to reopen the economy, get back to our either parts of our old normal and parts of our new normal. But it has definitely been a very well organized, and sometimes almost feels like a machine across the state. Our experience in the emergency department and at Yale is, I think, similar to what's happened across the state, which is that when we look at the pandemic, people often focus on the national news, and they've been seeing things like surges happen in other parts of the country. And because of where Connecticut has been in terms of creating a lot of testing access, being really sort of aggressive in terms of making and supporting masking as well as physical distancing, we have not really had surges in the same way that other parts of the country have had surges over the last several months. So we certainly had more cases, more hospitalizations following sort of the December, January timeframe like other parts of the country, but it was never like it was as bad as it was last spring. And where we're at now is, it's in many ways remarkable. I've been looking at the data, and in the last 3 weeks, we are having a pattern that is similar to what's happened in other countries around the world where they've done rapid vaccinations, which is quickly declining rates of hospitalizations as well as quickly declining rates of COVID cases. And so there's the Connecticut has its data tracker. I don't know if people look at the state website that often. And for months now, it had been that every county in the state was colored red. We had a high prevalence of COVID and a high positivity rate across the entire state. You check it out in the last week, and it's almost down to maybe 3 or 4 counties in the state that are left as red. And that is a direct result of where we're at with vaccination. And if you look at what happened in Israel, once they hit about 50% vaccinations, they started seeing pretty rapid declines in the amount of COVID spreading in the community. That's exactly what's happened here in Connecticut. And sort of getting to that question that was asked earlier, Josh, around where do we hit herd immunity or community immunity is the term I like to use better. He's spot on in saying that there's no right number. 55% is better than 50%, not just for the 5% of people that got vaccinated, but the people that know those people that may not be vaccinated and can't get COVID. And what we do know is we're already starting to see the benefits of reduced transmission for where we're at right now. I think I'm an optimist that in Connecticut, we can get vaccination north of 85, 90%. I really believe we can get there. It's different problems and challenges where we're at. And so sort of one of the things we see with vaccination is when we first started rolling out vaccines back in December and January, the biggest challenges were around creating trust and messaging around trusted messengers, healthcare providers, other people. Did they get the vaccine? Do we know that it's effective? Is it safe? We know so much more now than we knew back then. There have been people that have been in the vaccine trials for almost a year that were in the original parts of the vaccine trials now. We know so much more about side effects. We've had hundreds of millions of people receive these vaccines. And so now we're at a different spot of the vaccination campaign. We've gotten a lot of people vaccinated, and where we're sort of getting to is what we call social norming, kind of making it the regular thing to do. That, yeah, I went and got my COVID shot because that's just sort of the normal thing to do. It helps open up our economy. It helps open up our lives. It helps us get back to all the sort of things we want to do again, baseball game, barbecue, you name it, weddings, right? There's a lot of things that we're still don't really have the ability to congregate together indoors and things like that don't happen unless we get vaccinated. And so in many ways, we're at a different stage of vaccination and really focusing on how do we make different partnerships, how do we get to people that are having trouble getting vaccinated to make this next jump, which I think gets us from 50, 60% up to 70, 80%. And then the last mile is going to be hard. Getting from 70, 80% up to 90% is some of the hardest folks to convince. But I think that what will happen is as more and more people get vaccinated and more people know somebody that got vaccinated and that person had a good experience, that person didn't get COVID, that person didn't get what we call long COVID, which are prolonged symptoms from COVID, that helps people make it feel like it's more accessible. It feels less unknown, and they tend to go get a shot.
Doctor, there's a bunch of questions. We'll work through all of them and especially get into the vaccine itself. But especially right now at this moment, a lot of confusion with what came out from the CDC last week. And now that we're into this new phase of Connecticut restrictions, most of them have gone away. Should people feel comfortable getting rid of the mask? I know for many, it's become something that, it's just so natural. So actually taking off your mask in a setting where you're allowed to now feels like a strange occurrence. What can you tell us about how people should feel about ditching the mask? Because there have been, we've even seen medical professionals come out since the announcement and say, I wouldn't have done it that quickly.
Yeah, I think the challenge is this about the announcement is I don't want people to think that the announcement from the CDC was stop wearing masks. And I think, unfortunately, the way it gets simplified and it made its way out in the media is that it turned into we went from, yes, always wear a mask, to no, nobody needs to wear a mask. And that's really not what it was. It's really a little bit more nuanced than that, but we can still keep it simple. Here's what we know about COVID. We know so much more today than we did a year ago. A year ago, my parents were Lysoling the mail when they brought it in because we didn't know whether you could get COVID that way. Now we know that people get COVID if they're unvaccinated and have a prolonged, meaning 15 minutes or more, contact with somebody unmasked indoors. It is very difficult to get COVID outside, highly unlikely. It's very unlikely that vaccinated individuals will get symptomatic COVID. And so what I personally do is I kind of try to keep it simple and think of it this way. If I'm going to have a prolonged indoor contact, I would consider wearing a mask, even as somebody who's a vaccinated individual, for the reasons sort of said before, which is that there is some potential risk around variants, and there's a little bit of a risk around still getting symptomatic COVID, and I'd rather just avoid even getting symptomatic COVID. But I think it is reasonable, for example, when I'm with other vaccinated individuals, not to wear a mask, and I do that. We now have started having a few small group meetings where several vaccinated individuals are indoors together and don't have a mask on. Outside, I think it's very reasonable to exercise without a mask on. I think where this gets challenging and where sort of the nuance in these recommendations is to really think about the differences about being inside versus outside and being vaccinated versus not vaccinated. And then thinking about sort of where your personal risk tolerance is, and also trying to think about how much safety do we want to sort of visibly show in our communities. And so when I talk to a lot of local business owners here, a lot of them have workforces that are largely vaccinated, but are still going to ask that their workers wear masks so that they can help communicate that the environment and the business environment, whether it be a restaurant, a bar, whatever it is a safe place for people to come. I think that's very reasonable. We still sort of are in a world where, with only 50% of the state vaccinated, we don't really know who is and who isn't vaccinated. And we still have a lot of COVID transmission in our community. And so I think the key on this is sort of, ask yourself those two questions. Am I inside or am I outside? Am I with vaccinated or unvaccinated And I put unknown as sort of unvaccinated, and then sort of make a decision from there.
Thanks. Talking about the vaccine itself, we've heard the words messenger RNA. That's the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Johnson & Johnson is a little bit different. Can you just talk to us in layman's terms, the science of what's happening in someone's body when they get one of these vaccines?
Sure. So both vaccines have something that's very common in them that I think is important to note, which is, and it's a sort of bit of a sports analogy, but both vaccines are basically trying to teach your body's immune system the playbook on how to fight COVID if you get exposed to COVID sometime in the future. They do it in a slightly different way. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccine use messenger RNA, and all that means messenger RNA is it's a protein, and they basically make a protein that looks just like the protein that's on the outside of the coronavirus. You get a vaccine, your body sees that protein. That's the playbook. It says, okay, my immune system needs to know how to be able to fight this off. That's why you get some immune symptoms. They're not really side effects of the vaccine. They're certainly not the virus itself, where you get a little bit of a fever, you might feel a little run down. That's your immune system sort of getting activated because it's learning the playbook. That vaccine's out of your body in a few days. But now your body remembers what that protein looked like. And so if you're ever exposed to coronavirus proteins again, it sees it, your immune system goes, kills it, and you don't get sick. The J&J vaccine works off what's called an adenovirus. And what that means is they take a cold virus, a common cold virus that we get every year, they inactivate it so you can't really get very sick from it. And next to it, they put part of the proteins that are, again, part of the coronavirus. And so same thing, your body gets exposed to the vaccine, it learns, okay, here's a virus with this kind of protein on it that looks a lot like the coronavirus. I'm going to get my immune system ready to be able to fight off the COVID if I ever get it. And the same thing happens. The vaccine's out of your body. Your immune system remembers what to do. You get exposed to COVID a month later, 3 months later, 4 months later, and your body can fight it off. And so the important thing I think that people need to recognize is that neither of these technologies is something that is brand new. Both of these are things that we've been researching for a long time. There are other vaccines, other medical technologies that use the technologies of both of these that are out there. And that I don't think, and I really can't think of anything that has gotten in the vaccine world this much testing or scrutiny in recent history, if not ever. right? Most vaccines, when the FDA first said that they wanted to approve an emergency vaccine for COVID-19, they said we need companies to do clinical trials with 3,000 participants. How many participants did they end up enrolling in these trials? In the Pfizer and Moderna trials, over several 100,000 were enrolled in the trials. J&J, over 100,000 people have been in different clinical trials. And now we've got over 100 million people that have gotten the vaccine. And so, that's very different than any other new vaccine that's being developed where maybe a few thousand people are in a trial or we follow them over a little bit of time. We have so much science and data on this and everybody's looking at it, right? Nobody is thinking about anything besides COVID vaccines right now. And so that to me is reassuring as somebody who's, gotten vaccinated and helping other people get vaccinated.
Can you talk a little bit about the side effects? I was excited when I got to get my second Pfizer shot, but I have to admit that day when I was heading there, I was like, boy, really not looking forward to, these side effects that I've heard about. I still went, it was still good to get it, and I actually did not end up getting side effects, but why do different people get side effects? What are the side effects that people have experienced?
Sure. So I think the first point is good that you didn't get any side effects. We don't hear from the people that didn't get side effects, right? Your friends that did get some side effects talk about it. The people that didn't get any side effects don't really talk about it. So I think the important thing to remember is in the clinical trials, the majority of people didn't get side effects. Most people did not get any side effects the day after their shot. If you're getting the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, very few people got side effects on the first shot. Most of them felt it, and it was about 30 or 40% felt some side effects on the second shot. None of them which were severe. It's usually things like a fever, a headache, some muscle aches, some malaise. I had it. I had about, a fever that kind of shot up for about 5 or 6 hours. I took a couple Tylenol and then felt better and fine. It's more than sort of what I was used to having to my usual flu shot. But what that was compared to either getting COVID or long COVID or something like that is obviously pales in comparison. And so I think the thing to remember about these side effects is that if you're older, you're less likely to get these side effects than if you're younger. Even if you are younger and you're going to get these side effects, the majority of people don't get them at all. Some do. And if you do get them, the most you end up having to take to sort of manage them is maybe a Tylenol or a Motrin, and they're all gone within 12 to 24 hours. And so I think that that's sort of the important thing to sort of take away from this is that in the scheme of things, these are, pretty modest. They were all classified as mild side effects, not even as sort of severe side effects.
And on the Johnson & Johnson, there was obviously a big deal. We had a pause, a few cases of some real severe reactions. I'm not sure if that's been clarified that was caused by the vaccine, but definitely enough where the FDA and the CDC said, let's do a timeout, but that vaccine now is available again. What can you tell us about that if someone's up for getting the J&J?
Sure. So I think it's like I said before, right? This is some of the most scrutinized things in healthcare, in at least my history of being a physician and being in healthcare itself. That what was detected, and I think it's so important to know this, was the pause was not because something new was found out about the vaccine or that the vaccine was newly unsafe. The reason they did the pause, and this is so nuanced, was that a very small number, about 1 in a million to 1 in 2 million of people who get the J&J vaccine are at risk of getting a blood clot. And that blood clot normally is treated with a medicine called heparin. And the type of blood clot, though, that happens as a consequence of the vaccine is a different kind that needs to be treated with a different medicine. And so the CDC simply paused because we have so much scrutiny on these vaccines. There are other drugs that also similarly cause blood clots where we get guidance from the FDA or the CDC to treat it differently if it were to ever happen. The CDC paused it so they could educate doctors like me and say, hey, if you happen to see this 1 in a million clot, then make sure you treat it with this other medicine, not the first medicine that we usually use. And what unfortunately happened is I think people took that to mean that the vaccine was unsafe or that there was a high risk of a bad event. Putting things in perspective, there's probably about the same chance of getting struck by lightning as there is to getting one of these blood clots as a result of the vaccine. The chance of getting hospitalized if you get COVID is almost 10%. The chance of dying if you get COVID is 3%, right? 3 out of 100. The chance of getting what we call long COVID, symptoms that last for 5-6 months, is probably around 5 to 10% out of 100. And so all those things are way more likely, way more common than they are with these sort of 1 in a million type side effects. But unfortunately, that's what got the media attention.
And if you've gotten either shot, let's say you've gotten J&J or the other, is there a point in the side effects where you should go seek out a doctor? Is there a point where you'd say this is more than, and I need to watch this more carefully?
Sure. So the first thing I will say is there's a ton of resources in place for you to ask that question. So you shouldn't feel like, am I having a side effect? Should I be concerned? Are there places to go? At Yale New Haven Health System, we have a hotline that's out there for COVID vaccination. Anybody can call it. I know Hartford has some. Most of the departments of public health have vaccine hotlines. And so if you're living in that space where you're just feeling unsure, call the hotline. It doesn't mean that you have to go schedule a doctor's visit or go to an ER or anything like that. The likelihood that you actually will have to go see a doctor or go to ER is exceedingly small. I think there's a lot of sort of resources and things like that out there. If you're feeling side effects that last over several days or longer, sure, reach out, call the hotline, let us know what's going on. I think what we're finding is that, 95% of people that feel some symptoms feel it in the first day, it goes away. A very small number of people will experience something. I saw somebody last night who had a little bit of a rash that had been lasting 3 days. I saw her in the ER. I said, hey, you know what? This is going to go away in another 2 days. No treatment, nothing to do. She was reassured. And so I think that a lot of people are looking for reassurance, and there's a lot of resources out there to take advantage of.
Since the end of last year, we've been talking a lot about variants. They pop up in other countries. They popped up in this country as well. Generally, a scan of the news has been that these vaccines work well against the variants, but what can you tell us about variants in the vaccine?
Yeah, so variants are, first of all, they're not unexpected. We expect any virus to have a new variant, with every little bit of time, because viruses are living organisms and they are always looking to survive in the most fittest way. And so anytime we treat even an infection with an antibiotic, or we try to prevent a virus with the vaccine is trying to get smarter. It's saying, well, wait a second, I can't transmit from person to person. I can't survive if all these people are vaccinated in that way. I'm going to try to evolve and change. And so there are many variants of this coronavirus that are out there. Almost all the variants that come out still have parts of them that look like the many different proteins that are on these vaccines. And so when you get a vaccine dose, it's not just protecting you against one variant. It's usually protecting you against many, many different proteins that are on the surface of the COVID virus. And so as long as the variant doesn't totally change the virus into something brand new, the vaccines still work. And that's been what the data shows us. They may not work as well if these variants progress a lot or they change a lot, but they still work quite well. And so this is why you'll hear a lot of people say it's really important that we speed up vaccination. That, for example, in Connecticut, if we can get up to 70, 80, 90% faster, that's fewer potentials for variants to develop in the future, because there's just less COVID circulating around. There's less COVID that has a chance to live and develop a new variant form. And so we should expect that these variants develop over time. And many people may have heard there was an announcement the Pfizer CEO made it about 2 or 3 months ago now, where they said that they probably would have to have a booster shot. And the reason that they can come out and say we're probably going to need a booster shot, or I think probably a better way of thinking about it is we'll probably just get a COVID shot every year the way you get a flu shot, is that we expect there to be variants every year of a virus that's in our community. But we have a really good technology and a really good vaccine to fight it. And that's in many ways better than flu, right? Flu, our vaccines are nowhere near as good as our vaccines are for COVID. And we know that every year we need a new flu shot because there's new variants of flu every year. And so I sort of think of it in the same way as that.
You mentioned this before about how the vaccine works, and once COVID enters your body, what do we know about, I know there's breakthrough cases where people do end up with symptomatic COVID. They've had the vaccine, that is expected to happen. But I guess, you don't have an invincible shield in front of you once you've had the vaccine. You can actually, COVID would enter your body. Hopefully the vaccine would be able to defeat it really quickly. But I think there's a lot of, misunderstanding about, you're being exposed to COVID, even if you are vaccinated.
Yeah. So, let's back up to sort of think about how do we get to where we're at right now? If the COVID virus just gave us the common cold, if it was just a really bad year of sniffles and symptoms and a little bit of fever and a cough, we wouldn't have brought the entire world to standstill. We wouldn't have lost the lives of so many Americans and so many people around the world. We would not have overwhelmed our health systems around the entire world. But that's not what COVID is. Unfortunately, COVID is a virus that spreads fairly quickly and is fairly lethal. And even if not lethal, can really hospitalize many people because they need oxygen. And so that's what the vaccines deal with. Almost all of these vaccines, I don't want to say 100% because it's not 100, but there's even some new data that just came out this week from looking at all the people in nursing homes that got COVID shots. We're talking about something north of 99% that prevents you from getting hospitalized with COVID, or more importantly, near 100% when it comes to dying from COVID. And so that's why we're getting the shot. We are getting these shots so that people don't end up in the hospital with COVID and people don't die with COVID. And what that means is all you've got left is just another nasty cold. And so those who do get symptomatic COVID will have some mild symptoms, but they're not going to end up with severe disease, which makes this a totally different type of disease to work with. It's a world in which we can, get back to being open. We can get kids back in school. You can have people back in your businesses. We can start traveling. We can do all those other things if it's just another cold. We can't do that if it's something that could kill you.
And how about kids? I know we're just kind of 12 to 15 now can get the Pfizer vaccine. And there's studies, trials that are going on right now for much younger. What's your expectation of when it'll be available for kids? And are there any additional risks for children getting the vaccine?
So we've now got a decent amount of data in, let's say, older kids. Millions of 16 to 17-year-olds have already been vaccinated over the last several months because the original Pfizer trial included kids 16 and up. And we know that in those millions of kids that were 16 and 17, we didn't observe any worse side effects. We didn't observe anything scary. There was a tremendous amount of surveillance done. Both CDC and FDA are very protective when it comes to new drugs or research when it comes to kids. And so that was really reassuring. We now have data on the 12 to 15-year-olds that was equally as good. And I think the thing I would remind people of is that, the usual vaccine trial for a lot of the shots that we give our kids every year before they can go to school are based on far fewer children and certainly far fewer adults. There's been very few things I could think of where I'm thinking about, now my kids are too young for getting vaccinated, they're 4 and 2, where I would have to think about my kid getting a shot that 100 million or 200 million adults had already gotten without any major complication. And so I feel pretty reassured that we know a lot more about these vaccines than other ones that we often give. We also know quite a bit about its use in kids because there have been large trials conducted with a lot of children in them. And sort of the science of it tells me that there's nothing about these vaccines that should make us really be that scared that it would be different in kids. That, like I said, for adults, what's it doing? It's showing your body a protein, teaching you the playbook, vaccines out of your body, let your body fight away COVID if you ever get it. That works the same way in kids. This is not an inactivated virus. This is not, there's nothing new and scary in this technology that would be exposing children to something different. And so I think what we'll ultimately see is that we'll conduct the trials, we'll have more kids, we'll have more data and science to support it, and you'll see that age kind of cutoff for which kids can get vaccinated drop down. Moderna has a trial right now. Pfizer has a trial right now. We are enrolling for both of those locally in New Haven as well as across Connecticut. And that, if it can go as fast as it went for 12 to 15-year-olds, by this fall, you see data done and it going to the FDA for an approval. And so it's not, I think, unrealistic to think that by the either end of this year or early next year, we've got pretty widespread vaccine availability when it comes to age.
And Doctor, can you just talk a little, I know you've mentioned a couple of times the long haulers. I know this is an area that's still under a lot of research, but what's our understanding of it right now? Because there are a significant number of people who have had these COVID impacts from having COVID.
Yeah, so I lead a study here at Yale it's funded by the CDC. It's going on across the country. It's called COVID, and you can check, I'll put the website in there. It's www.covidinspire.com. And what that study is trying to do is get at exactly this issue, which is figure out what is long COVID and how long does it last. Right now, what we've got is a lot of early evidence as well as media reports, and we've heard from people on forums on Facebook and other places that they had COVID. And most people, about 90% or so of people's symptoms go away within 3 weeks. There seems to be somewhere between 5 and 10%. We don't know the exact number of people who seem to have symptoms that go after 3 weeks. Some of those, a friend of mine's an ER doc down in Atlanta, he had very mild COVID, never was in the hospital. It was last June. He's now, 9 months out and he still can't work a full ER shift because he gets fatigued. He's got some memory challenges. And this is a guy who was running, 10Ks and doing triathlons before COVID hit. And so we don't know what's causing it. We think that what it is probably related to our immune system's development of antibodies to fight COVID, that those antibodies also may be causing additional symptoms in our own body, that they sort of, our own antibodies attack ourselves. That's a lot of work is happening about that here in Connecticut, Yale, and other places to sort of better understand that. We're trying to figure out, when people have long COVID, is that a 3-month problem, a 6-month problem, a 1-year problem? We'll hopefully know that answer, in another year or so as we're having the chance to follow people. The other thing that's been really reported that's interesting is anecdotally, some people have said that getting vaccinated made their long COVID symptoms go away. So they had COVID 5 months ago, they had a nagging cough, they got vaccinated, and all of a sudden it was gone. That's not science yet, that's still just a story. But the reason I bring that up is to say that there's still a lot to learn about this. But when I think about sort of what are one of the reasons I got vaccinated, I'm young. I was at very low risk of getting hospitalized with COVID, or certainly dying from COVID would be very rare for somebody like me. But I was very much at risk of getting long COVID. And that was something that when I thought about my life, being able to take care of my kids, work as a doctor, be a good dad, all this kind of stuff, not getting long COVID was a big part of that. And so that was one of the reasons I chose to get vaccinated.
And I just want to let everyone know, I think we've covered most of the questions that we've had in the chat or the Q&A, but if you have questions, now is the time to ask them. You can put them into the chat, and we'll ask Dr. V those questions. And we appreciate him giving us so much time and so much information. Doctor, I guess, one kind of last question for me, just how are things at the hospital? I'm sure the hospital staff's gone through a lot over the last year plus. It sounds like the numbers are down, but you still do have COVID patients there and across the state.
Yeah, it's all relative, right? Like I think the last numbers I saw is still admitted in the hospital in the ICU with COVID is still 30 or so people. It's not 300, 400 that it was months ago. I think our peak was something around 600 hospitalized with COVID in our health system at one point last year. And so, I think there's a very positive outlook amongst healthcare teams in terms of where we're at now from where we are in the past. I think people are very tired, though. I think, doctors, nurses, folks who work in the hospitals and health systems, they're sort of feeling the same COVID fatigue that anybody feels. We all want to travel. We all want our kids to be able to go to school and not have to worry about this stuff or have another 2-week closure. We want to, be able to get together with friends and have a party. We want to go to weddings. And so I think that that's the part that has just made this hard, which is that it wears on people that, they keep going back to the hospital. They keep seeing folks with COVID. We don't have that moment where all of a sudden we went from pandemic to no pandemic and life's back. What it's going to be, and I think this is all of us are going to have to learn some resiliency around this, is it's going to be a slow process, right? And so relaxation of some of the mask requirements is just one little step in that. There will be relaxation around the sizes of gatherings. There'll be relaxations around having meetings. Here at Yale, we can't still have, our graduation is coming up in a month for our residents. We train 60 residents in emergency medicine, and it's normally one of our biggest parties of the year is to graduate these residents who've been with us for 4 years, learned how to be ER docs and go out to the world. And this year's graduation is just going to be the graduates getting together without any food or drink and kind of, getting a few awards. And that's 15 people, not the usual 150 people. And so I think people want that part of the world to come back. We're all social animals. We need our contacts with others to sort of, feel like it helps our mood. And so I think that that's what you'll see from a lot of the healthcare workforce is optimism that we're getting there, but eagerness to get there faster.
I'll close it out with this question for you. For anyone who's on the line today, if they're talking to someone who has chosen not to be vaccinated so far, what's the best way for them to approach that conversation, share some of the things that they've heard from you today? How should they deal with that? What are you doing with people who are still hesitant?
Sure. So I think two things. There's one, you as sort of a personal individual talking to family members. And then there's the other, which is recognize that folks on this call are business leaders and civic leaders in their communities. And I think that confers with it certain sort of opportunities that are just different than somebody that gets at home. if you're talking to somebody personally, whether that be at work, home, wherever it is, I have really started to focus on simplifying this for people to ask them why they want to get vaccinated or what one thing they think they would get out of vaccination. I think we have overly focused on hesitation or reluctance of vaccination. Almost everybody's reluctant to get vaccinated. Even when I got vaccinated, I guess I probably in the back of my head had a little bit of hesitation as well, because I was one of the first people to get vaccinated in the state as a frontline ER doc, and this was a brand new thing. And so that's okay. We do lots of things in life where we feel a little bit of reluctance, but we do them because there's some motivation, something positive, something that we want back. Maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's going to a baseball game, maybe it's not getting sick or keeping your other family members safe. I think the key is to help everybody find one motivation in that conversation and help listen to folks about what their one motivation is and then amplify it so they get vaccinated. And then as a business leader, I think you all have a different sort of opportunities in your community. I think, my neighbors, a couple of them run small businesses here in the North Haven and Hampton areas. And, they've been talking about maybe putting up a poster outside their business to say that 90% of our staff are vaccinated, or 100% of our staff are vaccinated. One of them runs a brewery. That's the kind of stuff that, I think people think about when you go walk around the city and you see an A, B, or C public health rating for a restaurant. I think it's really reassuring if you potentially saw that an establishment had a lot of vaccinated people there. It gives visibility to vaccination in a way that's very positive. And so I think that exists. I think there's a way to support your employees in getting vaccinated. And I think that sort of what I call social norming of vaccination is something that we all have an opportunity to do as community leaders to get us from where we're at right now to that next level.
June, thank you so much. It's been really informative and very helpful. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you all.
Great. We're going to continue to do webinars on this series. Our next one is coming up in a few weeks. We will talk again about how we continue to have opportunities for people to be able to get the vaccine. The doctor said, what is your motivation? Our motivation in a business group is that we can get more business activity going, more economic activity by having more people vaccinated. So we hope you'll join us. Again, answering questions that you may have, others may have. That's our goal of putting on this series. Also want to let everyone know that we have our real estate and construction forecast presented by the Regional Water Authority and put on with Markham. That's coming up on June 15th. And we are bringing people back together, excited to have in-person events. We're going to ease into it because we're going to do a 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. online program. So you'll be able to watch it from wherever you are. But then at 4:30, we have 3 different breweries that we're working with. We're going to have beer, wine, networking at each of those locations. There is a fee. You have to register to be able to go to those, but we'll be at those for 2 hours together. We're keeping the capacity around 50 people at each of those locations, but should be a great time to bring people back together and celebrate all of the exciting things that are happening in Greater New Haven. So please go to our website, register. Extremely excited to see all of you again at our events. Thank you again for being here with us. You can watch this recording on our YouTube page. I know I'm going to share this recording with some friends and family because the information, especially that we just got from the doctor, extremely helpful for anyone who has questions. Thanks again. Have a great day.